So here are the tools and supplies that I'm going to use for this project. I have pre-cut some watercolor card, and you really do want to use watercolor card for this. If you use something like an actual index card, it's not going to absorb the watercolor very well, and if you work with it at all, it's going to make the paper kind of pill up. And so you do want to start with some watercolor paper, but you can get really inexpensive watercolor paper and cut it down to size. These are 3.5 by 5-inch cards. I have several sizes of watercolor brushes. I have a fairly large one, and I found that that is kind of key to making these loose feathers. You could make leaves doing the same technique. And then I want some smaller brushes to kind of create the extra lines and that sort of thing. And my splatters. I have my dirty watercolor palette. I may bring some more color over here, but this is the palette that I created those previous feathers from. It's nice and dirty. I've mixed a lot of colors in here. And I couldn't be bothered to clean it off. And sometimes you just get these lovely accidents of color. So I'm going to keep working from here. I may bring some more color over to it. This is my watercolor palette the way it normally is. And then I have some metallic or pearl colored watercolors that I will use in the end to kind of sparkle them up a bit. Very simple supplies. Very, very simple supplies. I also have a heat tool, and if you do not own a heat tool and you end up loving watercolor, I'm going to suggest that you get one. It's a good investment, and because you can move things along. I am not a patient crafter. I want to be able to move on to the next step, and on this particular project I found that having dried the first layer, then I got better results with the second layer. So either you're going to need to do this in a couple of sittings, or get a hair dryer or your heat tool out and dry in between. But I'll tell you that as we go along. Let me kind of clear things off and we'll get started. Okay, so I'm in here nice and tight on this, and I'm just going to go over, I've wet my brush, and just kind of, you want it to have plenty of water in it. I'm going to pick up some paint, and then the key to this is to stay really loose. So I'm using a round brush that has a point to it, and I'm going to touch it and pull it down kind of in a feather shape, and then I may come back and bring a couple of feathery points down with it. And while that is wet, I'm going to go and pick up maybe another little bit of a color, maybe a little green, and touch that in, so that there's a little bit of a couple of colors in here, and maybe even come out here a little bit. And it doesn't look too much like a feather right now. It's just kind of a blob of a couple of colors, but that's okay. That's okay. This is just, we're just playing with our paints, and I'm going to set that aside to dry and work on another one. Rinse my brush out, and let's see, I think I'm going to do kind of another bluish color one, and then I'm going to go pick up a little bit of Payne's Gray. I love these blues and grays together. And you know, if you go out and pick up feathers on the ground, they're not these perfectly shaped little things. They kind of have these spurs, if you will, of flowers, of the little feather spines. And so I'm just going to leave that a little ragged. We're not painting realistic feathers. We're doing kind of an impression of a feather, if you will. Okay, so let's do something else. Let's go get maybe a little more bold color. I'm going to get a little bit of orange here. Come down with that. And what should we put with that? What if we put some pink with that? This is a fun time just to play with your colors. See what colors go together. Because here's the thing, this is just paper. It's just paper. Sometimes feathers have those little hangy down things. I'm going to put just a few little spikies with this pink. And just call that one done for the moment. So let me show you, now that we have a couple of them to work with, I'm going to take my heat tool and dry this. Because, first of all, watercolor dries lighter. And you don't really know what your colors are going to look like until you have they're dry. But watercolor is transparent. So watercolor is a transparent medium. And what that means is that when we layer our colors together, you can see through them, which is great. And that's where kind of the beauty for me of watercolor is. So I have this here now, and now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to pick up, I'm working with my smaller brush, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of contrasting color, and I'm going to kind of come in and I'm going to draw that spine of the feather down in there, right? And then this feather seems to be shaped kind of like this, so I'm going to kind of give a little bit of a sense of those where the feathers come off and outline it just a little bit. Again, this is just more suggestion than actual than reality, right? So I'm going to put a few of these little wispy things down in here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I may pick up, come over here and get a little bit of paint and just, now I'm going to come back with some metallics here in a little bit. Because I used the pink, I'm also going to do little pink spatter on here. And maybe a little bit of that orange as well. Just to kind of tie it all together. So you can see it's more of a suggestion. We kind of let the watercolor brush define the shape. We added another little transparent layer of detail. Not much detail. Don't overwork it. That's the thing. When you start trying to make it look realistic, it loses the looseness of it. And then we splatter it a little bit. So let's do a couple more of these because they're easy peasy. And they're so fun because there's so much that you can do with these little cards. You can use them as tip-ins in your Bible. They make really nice focal images on cards. If you want to do a little card that is an encouragement to somebody, I think that would be a fun thing to do, is just write them a little note and hand it to them at church on Sunday, or when you're going through a line at, I don't know why, I'm just drawn back to this pink. Let's add a little bit of blue to that. We're going to end up with a purple, I think. Okay, let's dry that. It's not the prettiest thing I've ever painted, but you never know what you're going to get until you dry it back. Let's go back in maybe with a little bit darker blue this time. And you'll see what I mean about it being transparent. I'm going to dry that. Okay, so here's what I mean about watercolor being transparent. Can you see that even though this is the bolder color on top, it's still influenced by the color that's underneath it? So I can still see these lines of the previous color that I put on there. Let's do one more layer. Let's go back to that soft blue and just come in here. And I'm going to kind of make a few more little jagged edges down here. And let's dry that. So we now have 3 layers of transparent color. So I want you to see, do you see how you can see all 3 of those layers? That to me is the beauty of watercolor. Even though they were, the first layer was very transparent, the second layer was pretty bold, and then we went back with actually a lighter blue than we had on the first, but I can see all 3 of those layers. Now I'm going to take a little Payne's gray, which is it's kind of a bluish gray, and I'm just going to go draw my spikes, the little spines of the feather. Give it a little definition, but you know, this is so pretty all by itself. It doesn't really need much. So I'm going to put just a hint, suggestion maybe, of these little spines, and call it done. I think that's pretty. Okay, let's do some splatter. I'll put a little bit of pink in there because we started with that. And take the blue, a little bit of blue. Then I want to come back in with that Payne's gray just to So the point is to just stay really loose and playful. Try not to grip your paintbrush really tightly, because if your hand is holding really tight, your muscles are really tight, and what you want is to have a really loose hand, whether you're painting with the big or the little paintbrush. So stay really loose. I'm going to come back and show you just my finishing touches with the metallic, and we'll see how these turned out. So I want to show you something that I discovered while I was working on this, and that is that coming back with a little bit of dark contrast, a little pop of color, if you will, is kind of a fun thing. The other thing that I did on this one that I really like is I realized that coming out with these little wispies out off of the feather itself is kind of fun. So I've done all of the other work, but I'm going to come back in with my paintbrush, and I'm going to kind of get most of the paint off of it so that it's pretty dry. So I don't want a lot of water on my paintbrush. And I'm going to come in and I'm just going to quickly, with a really loose hand, create some of these little wispies out off of the feather proper. And it's just kind of nice and graphical. It doesn't, again, we're not going for realism. We're kind of just going for nice little visual texture and details. Okay, so I finished my cards, and I'm going to show those to you individually here, but while I'm showing those to you, I'm going to kind of prep my metallic watercolors. These are by Gonze Tambi. They are by Kuretake, Kuretake. They're very highly pigmented, but you could use any metallic or pearlescent to add a little bit of shimmer. But what I have found with these is that they do better if you pre-wet them. So I'm going to go along here and pre-wet the ones that I'm likely to want to use. I've got a little silver one over here. This is more of a gold collection. Use this, more of the golds, and we can do some splatter with it, but I may just add a few little touches of gold and just a little bit of splatter. Not going to do much. A little bit of shimmer, you see, just a touch of shimmer, and then we can move on. And what you may not be able to tell is that a little bit of time has passed since you last saw me, and what I'm realizing is that my hand has gotten a little not so loose. I started to be really careful and detailed, and I just find I don't get as good a results when I am not loose and free with my hand. So I'm going to try and be, if I need to, shake my hand out a little bit and remind myself this is just paper. I can't really make a mistake. And so just being looser with it, a little freer. Maybe put it a little bit down in here. Some splatters. I'm going to like it better. I'm just going to like it better if I will be a little freer with it. Just nice, loose strokes are good. So I thought I would show you an idea that I kind of came up with right here at the end, and that is to actually just do some dotting on. I started dotting here. Get this up here where you can see it. But doing a little dotting decor. So I'm just making sure there's a little bit of soupy paint. You don't want it real wet. And then you can just add little dots if you want to. You could do this actually with any color of paint. Just to do a little contrast. Kind of like it going up the spine and maybe coming off in a couple of places. Just fun. Just fun. Do what you want to decorate your feathers.